this sphere appears, just materializes out of nowhere, right beside my right shoulder.
Right.
And I'm with 2 or 3 people, and they go, we all see it. Yep. And it's there, it's in this dimension, and in a second, it doesn't float away, it just vanishes. And I turn to everyone, I go, they're here. But when you're dealing with a higher order of physics, both in telepathy, let's say, in remote viewing, but also in travel, you're not dealing in a straight line universe.
So the craft we saw was physical. It was there. Now, it wasn't there, and then it was there, and then it wasn't there. So, yeah.
Right. What happened, actually, is we had, as people got together, I said, please be quiet, be quiet. And right outside the circle, we heard 4 or 5 people, not humans, talking. Look at what we're doing to the planet, to Mother Earth. I don't know if you remember the astronaut that I worked with, named Gordon Cooper.
Yes.
Okay. Sure. Yeah, and Gordon Cooper, when in 1956, he was up near Edwards, and broad daylight, one of these objects lands out on a dry lake bed, and his crew films it. And that's 56, 1956. I was 1 year old. Well, I was talking to him. He and I were invited to address, there's a constitutional law, tends to be conservative group in Washington called the Federalist Society. They pretty much appoint and recommend all the Supreme Court and federal judges to the Republican members of Congress and presidents. But they had invited, and frankly, I don't care about left, right, Republican, Democrat. This issue transects all those fracture lines. But I was asked, and along with Gordon Cooper, to address them for one of their annual meetings. I went, well, this is interesting. Because they had heard that what I was putting out was that, and it was after the 2001 press event, I believe, that these were illegal, unconstitutional operations, because my team had gone around and briefed all these senior people who had been denied access. And so we wrote this unless otherwise directed letter. And to finish that story, what the punchline was, unless we are directed otherwise, beginning January of 1998, we're going to start moving to the public top secret documents and testimony, even though these people have signed non-disclosure agreements for 7 years, and that there will be no recourse to punish them under the rule of law, because the projects managing it are themselves illegal. And since the projects are illegal, they cannot use the law to prosecute anyone. And the way a UNOD letter works, unless otherwise directed letter works, is that unless they make an overt act and say you're wrong, that letter stands. And it was sent, return receipt requested to the head of every agency, Department of Justice, FBI, every armed service division, CIA, NSA, et cetera, and so on.
Yeah, I remember the letter. I remember it.
And to this date, as of this moment, right now, I have never received, nor has anyone on my team who's a military witness received, a phone call or a visit saying, do not speak about this. Because we put them under this umbrella. So the next time you get someone like that, Jan, who says that they spoke to you and someone approached them, send them over to me.
Okay.
Because here's what's going to happen. If they speak to us and they're approached after that, whoever approaches them is in the biggest world of trouble. They don't even want to, you don't even want to know what trouble they're in.
Okay.
I'm being serious.
Yeah, no, I expect it.
So, I mean, none of these guys. I have a guy that just defected 2 years ago from the Technology Management Office, the sub-basement of the Pentagon. And he was read across 18, baseline clearance, across 18 of these UFOs, unacknowledged special access projects. And the stuff he shared, we don't have time to go into, but none of those people have ever been approached and threatened. So, I just tell people, you got to do it right. You've got to do it under an umbrella where you have established and asserted the legality or the illegality of the unacknowledged special access projects, because otherwise people are intimidated and they think the law is against them. In reality, the law is not against them. The law is very much on our side of disclosure and getting the truth out.
Right.
So that's something I can prove. It's something we've done for 20 some years now. Well, in May 9th was the 19-year anniversary of the Disclosure Project, when we started moving a lot of this stuff forward. So now, I mean, people can still be nasty to you. You mentioned Congressman Schiff got, about the same time he got cancer. As you know, my best friend Sherry Adamak, who was helping me with this, got cancer. Everyone died. I'm the only person still alive. And then the former CIA director, who was trying to get us one of these 0-point technologies, named Bill Colby. He was CIA director for Ford Nixon. He was old and retired. They found him floating down the Potomac River.
I remember that.
Yeah.
When I read that story, I said he knew something they didn't want anyone else to know.
Well, I felt very guilty about that, actually. But I mean, I recommended that he go wide with this and not try to do it. He was going to meet with a member of my board and hand this off sort of clandestinely. But what I've told people is that you cannot do this stuff in the darkness and secrecy. You've got to do it full on. Everyone's got to be watching. I don't know if you know this. Before I was known publicly, I went to a MUFON conference in 1990. About the time I founded the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence and all that. And there was a spook there, an intelligence officer. We call them spooks. And he was a lot like the cigarette man on the X-Files. Not I'm kidding, the hair and we go for a walk. And I had started talking to people what I was planning to do with this project, especially CE5, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. And he says, if you're going to do that, you need to get millions of people who know who you are, or you are, and I'm quoting, a dead man walking. And I thought the man was on crack or something. He wasn't. He was telling the truth. So some things happened where I took what he said to heart. And that's why I ended up on Larry King and some of these shows, even though I was, practicing as an emergency doctor. I mean, it's hardly someone, running a trauma, an emergency wants to be all over the news dealing with UFOs because, the people think you're not wound too tight, as John Callahan said, the FAA guy who's on our team. But what I tell people is that, I took his advice and it was good advice, but it still didn't protect us from everything until later we got really good protection. So let me tell you, there are very good people in these covert programs who want to see this resolved. And I think Ben Rich stepping out that little bit was the beginning of it.
I do too. I'm just sad. It's been 40 years almost, and we're still, I don't know. I would say we're closer to the truth, but we could be a lot closer to the truth, right?
Yep. We need to be much further along. We sure do.
Well,
also, I think what was cool about, when you asked how are these things going from this point in space time to another, and he kind of answered your question with a question. It's something I actually do a lot. And he said, how does ESP work? And your answer was spot on. And it has to do with non-locality in physics, which is the whole last part of Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind is about consciousness and physics and the entanglement, where nothing, we think in a linear way all the time across space. But when you're dealing with a higher order of physics, both in telepathy, let's say, in remote viewing, but also in travel, you're not dealing in a straight line universe. You're dealing in a holographic universe where one point is connected to another, not through a line, but like this, intimately. And that's how these objects are going from one star system to another. And this is down to the level of the equations. I know people I've met with who work down at the Marshall Space Flight Center and the Redstone Arsenal in Alabama, who have this worked out literally what you said to the equations.
Yeah. I met some of those same people.
Yeah.
Well, good.
And we're still using cars burning oil. How brilliant.
No, we have electric cars, but they're tied into a power plant that's burning coal.
A power plant that's burning coal, or natural gas, right?
But we feel good about it.
Yeah, it's sort of a self-congratulatory thing. I call it's sort of like TSA is The people I know at the CIA call it security theater, because they're so
Oh,
ineffective at catching actual bombs and stuff.
right,
And a lot of those things are like environmental theater.
right.
It makes people feel good, but the world's going to hell in a handbasket, and we need to bring out these really innovative, high-tech solutions that have been around for decades. I mean, the fact that I have a man on my team who's a rock-solid scientist, top scientist, the biggest Department of Defense lab in the world at the Naval Research Labs that Thomas Edison founded.
Right.
And he said, yeah, that document clearly stated we mastered gravity control in October 1954. Now, I wasn't even a twinkle in my father's eye then. And and I'll be 65 next month. So it's like, that's how long that we have gone past when we should have. And look at what we're doing to the planet, to Mother Earth.
Well, that's exactly the thought that went through my head as a 10-year-old boy standing in my backyard looking at a landing craft hovering 10 feet off the ground, making a humming noise with my brother, was, holy Toledo, why aren't we building these things? Look how advanced this technology is. It's just phenomenal.
Well, tell me about that story again. I know you've shared it before, and it's fascinating.
Yeah, so my brother is, I call him Mr. Young Tesla. He knows how to do stuff, but he doesn't know how he knows how to do it. Just it comes to him. I mean, at the age of 80, he was fixing the neighbor's television sets. I don't know how you would even know how to do that. But we had been following this in the press back in the late 50s or early 60s. The fact that flying saucers were being seen all over the United States. And we determined that they were using some kind of electromagnetic energy to fly. And so we decided we're going to build a 30-foot disc in our backyard with 3 pulsed electromagnetic engines. And so we designed this thing out on paper. My mother took us to the store. We were waiting for her to do shopping. We found a magazine rack, and in the very bottom right-hand corner, there was a book called Flying Saucer Review, a little magazine, a little half-size magazine. Yep. So we bought it for $1, took it home, and we're reading this thing, and it says in there, these flying saucers are seen around military installations, nuclear power plants, and places where anti-gravity research is being done. So we're just 2 little kids. We look at each other and say, well, we're doing anti-gravity research. Maybe one will come here. Well, literally within a month, I'm in my room in the morning, 6:30 on a Saturday. My brother comes in and says, there's something going on in the backyard. We need to get out there. He said they were playing around with his screen. So I said, well, did you look out the window to see? He said, no, I didn't look out. So I said, well, I was at one end of the house. He was at the other. So I said, well, let's go down to your room and take a look. So we walked down, looked at his window from the door jam, and there's no commotion, nothing. So I said, well, let's go out in the backyard and see what's going on. Now, this was in late April, right before the time change. So the sun was already up above the horizon, so it was bright outside.
What year was this?
This is 1965.
Okay.
And as we're walking down the hallway where the bedrooms were, I'm looking back at him talking, and he says, look, and I spin around. We had a wall of windows in the living room, and the sun was coming in from behind it, and I didn't see anything. I said, what? And he said, there was somebody standing against the window, and when I told you to look, they floated backwards. And I thought that was weird, like floated backwards. It didn't make any sense to me. So I said, well, let's go out in the backyard. I thought he's actually just pulling my leg. So we went into the garage. As we walked out, I noticed the clock on the wall, which is analog. It was, both hands were straight down, so it was 6:30. Walked into the garage, which is actually where I was living. My dad had turned it into a bunk room for other reasons we won't go into here. And I went out in the backyard to the end of the house, looked back to his window. There's nothing there. So I'm thinking, all right, you got me up. Good for you. You got me up 6:30 in the morning on Saturday to go look at nothing. So we turn around to go back into the house, and boom, right in front of our eyes is this craft 30 feet away, hovering 10 feet off the ground.
Wow.
It was oval shaped, kind of like if you took a brick and you blew it up to 10 feet by 4 feet by 3 feet tall, and you completely smooth the edges, and then you put 4 landing gear on it. And then between the landing gear, there was these crossbars, brown crossbars with a bolt in the center. So my first thought was, oh my gosh, these things are real. I'm staring at this craft, right? It's not on the ground, it's hovering in the sky. And the second thought that went through my mind, it looks like it's man-made. Now, it could have possibly been ours, but here's the thought. As I stared at the craft, it was perfectly smooth. It was metal. It was perfectly smooth. There was like not a seam or a rivet in it. I don't think we had the ability to bend metal back in 1965 without putting rivets or some kind of a seam in it.
Right.
And then the next thought that went through my mind was, man, these beings must be really tiny because it's only 3 feet tall. They must be really short. Mm-hmm. And then I thought, well, wait a minute. There's no doors or windows on this thing. How do they get in and out?
Right.
And so at that point, I said to my brother, I'm going to go get a camera. I'll be right back. So I ran into the garage, went to go into the house, and we locked ourselves out. So I began pounding on the door And halfway through my knocking, because no one was up in the house, my knocking, I noticed my hand goes dunk, dunk, like it's like this dunk, dunk, like it stopped and then it went. Well, that's weird. 2 more knocks and my older brother opens the door. I go bolting past him as he says, "What's going on?" And I said, "Nothing," because I didn't want to stop and explain to him. I wanted to go get the camera, get back out. So I got outside. He was up watching TV, by the way, which is interesting because he wasn't up when we went out like a minute before. And if you remember the old TV sets from the 60s, they were vacuum tubed.
Right.
And they were these cathode ray tubes for the screen. It took at least a minute or two for those things to warm up. So we went in the backyard. The craft was gone. My brother was standing on the swing set looking out to the west, and the craft was gone. And I said, "What happened?" And he said, "Well, it just was frozen there in the sky, and then it slowly started to drift away, and then it just went shot off over the horizon." So I said, "Okay." So we're looking at each other like, who are we going to tell this to? No one's going to believe us. He's 9, I'm 10. You know, we're just little kids. So we kind of just forgot about it. But in going back and peeling it apart, a couple of things come to mind. One is, we were at the end of the house. We should have seen the craft when we walked out, and yet it wasn't there. And then it was there. Boom.
Right.
So how does that work? You know? Mm-hmm. And then as I'm looking at it, why is it I decided to go into the house and get a camera? Because my brother believes he was taken aboard. I have no reason to doubt it because of his life and everything that's gone on with him. But as I was knocking, my knock stopped and then continued. It's almost as if they switched off time. Right. And many years later, he said to me, "Do you realize that we lost 2 hours out in the backyard?" And I said, "Why do you say that?" He said, "Because when we went out, it was 6:30. When we went back in, it was after 8 o'clock. And I said, "Well, how do you know that?" He says, "Because Joel, our older brother, was watching a program that didn't come on until after 8 o'clock. So now we never really thought about it. And the funny thing is, we completely lost interest in building this craft that we had designed, and we just kind of lost interest in the whole subject. It was like I went to school Monday morning. I told my best friend Tom about this, and he's listening to me as I tell him the story, and I went into a lot of detail, and he's just staring at me. And so I finally paused so he'll say something. And you know what he said?
What?
Do you want to go play baseball?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't even register in his brain.
Right.
You know? So I realized right then and there, you could not talk to people about this because they had no way in their paradigm of processing it. So I just didn't talk about it for 20 years. It was my little secret, right?
Right.
As a lot of people do. So,
yep. It's 50 years ago that happened, right? Or 55
years ago. 55.
Wow. Well, see, to me, that's a classic story because the ET craft are seamless and they go in and out. Like the CE5, you look at the Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind movie, we'll have an object. I don't know if a lot of people know this, that there's an ET in that movie named Bijou, Bijou.
Right.
And that was a Joshua Tree a few years ago, Joshua Tree National Park. We're in the very center of the park. And we're taking a break because we've been out for a few hours and people need to get up, move around and whatever. And I walked east from the geology tour site we have down this sand path. And this sphere appears, just materializes out of nowhere, right beside my right shoulder.
Right. And
I'm with 2 or 3 people and they go, we all see it. Yep. And it's there, it's in this dimension. And in a second, it doesn't float away, it just vanishes. And I turn to everyone, I go, they're here. And we've been doing the remote viewing and the inviting and the CE5 protocols, which those of you listening, if you want to learn how to do this, there's an app we just released called CE5 Contact app. Right. And it takes you through the whole process. And you can do it. Everyone can do this in their backyard or wherever you're locked down. And so I said, we need to get everyone back together. So we had like 30 some people there out in the desert in a circle. But as we're going back, now you can't see anything. It's just pitch black. And people don't get this from the movie because it's too much detail. You have to edit everything out for a 2-hour movie to make it, viewable to the general public. But what happened actually is we had, as people got together, I said, please be quiet, be quiet. And right outside the circle, we heard 4 or 5 people, not humans, talking. Everyone heard them. But you didn't see anything. And I had military grade night scopes. So I'm looking over at where the sound's coming from, which is maybe 3 feet outside our circle. and it's just empty air.
Yeah.
But everyone hears, and most people heard female voices, but there was one male voice, and speaking not English or language I've ever heard on Earth. And everyone's going, oh my God, they're here. I say, yeah, they're here. They're right here, partially in this dimension, coming and going. So my friend next to me, Raven, who's in this documentary, Close Encounter of the Fifth Kind, she had a camera, a 35 millimeter, and she just held her breath and took a photo. And in the photo is this ET that turned and is waving to us. And that we then, it appeared and disappeared. That sphere came back, and it's in the photo also, but in a flash of an eye. So I said, we need to sit down and meditate. So we had these electronic, we had a magnetometer that picks up magnetic field changes, and you zero it so it's that baseline out in the desert. So all of a sudden it starts going off, and it's this being using the electronics. Because whenever we've been out in that area and they're in this dimension too long, fighter jets are flown in and turn on their headlights all over us. I mean, people don't know half of what goes on these expeditions. I mean, it's like cool stuff. So we're there doing this, and this ET is communicating through these electronics. And so we're asking them questions and he's answering. And it turns out I did a series of questions, and he's from the Andromeda galaxy, which is 2.5 million light years from here. And then we got his name. And, you know, when I would get the information, I would then speak it and say, am I correct? Your name is Bijou. And there'd be beep, beep, yes. 1 was no, 2 was yes. We just had a very simple code we worked out with the ETs. And this went on for about 45 minutes, this communication. Very specific, very amazing. So you can take this quite far, but you got to stay centered and be in that state of consciousness that's calm. But I always tell people, these beings, they don't have to be in 3D to be all around you. That's why that being that floated, your brother thought he saw him at the door. The one you said it floated over, they can sort of dematerialize, come through a craft that maybe wasn't even visible at that time because you looked in the yard. It may not even been in this dimension. It might have just been shifted beyond what I call the crossing point of light. You know, everything that's resonating beyond light speed, which takes you into the realm of thought.
Well, the craft and consciousness, but the craft we saw was physical. It was there. Now it wasn't there, and then it was there, and then it wasn't there. So
right. Exactly. That's what Corso described, by the way. You know, Colonel Corso wrote the day after Roswell when he was at White Sands. There was this craft that was on radar, and they went out. It had gone down on the range, and he went out on a Jeep, and it was broad daylight, and it would appear, and then it would dematerialize right in front of him. And all he would see would be, you know, like when there's heat rising off the road, like a mirage in the desert, it would be sort of field distortion effect, but in the shape of the craft, vaguely. Right. And then it would pop back into this dimension and then dematerialize. It did this several times, and then it stabilized. And that's that whole experience, you know, when he said, you know, the ET was asking for some help with us stopping, targeting them and killing them. And he said, what's in it for me? And the ET says, a new world, if you can take it. That's how we end this documentary. So that story is beautiful. And that, I think that was in 56. It was in the 50s, mid to late 50s. But see, back then, a lot of people say, well, you know, now in 2020, we have so many technologies. This is one of the reasons we need to keep space free of all weapon systems, because we have technologies that are 100 generations evolved past what was turned on at Roswell that knocked those craft down at Roswell that we have. And so when you're doing CE5, they may or may not come into 3D because the systems that we have in space and on land and in the air and under the water are so developed that they could be targeted when they're, you know, 3D. But if they're in 5th dimension, if they're in some other dimension, then they just pop in and out. It's much safer for them and for us. So I always tell people when you're doing CE5, you got to learn what I call this whole concept of ETs and the new cosmology. It's a chapter in my first book, because we've got to understand that the cosmos is this quantum conscious hologram where everything's connected, but a full 3D craft, like you said, you saw, doesn't have to stay 3D. It can be 3D and then vanish into another dimension and come back and forth. So imagine if you're out under the stars, there could be something that was not illuminated, like an aircraft, that appears. You might just see the moonlight on it, and then it shifts and it's dematerialized. But it's still there. The key thing is it's still there. It's just that your eyes can't pick it up. Now, what's interesting, a lot of the new cameras,
infrared,
they have the digital light sensors, the CCDs and stuff, they will pick it up more than your eye. So I tell people, experiment with these cameras, because you can get some amazing stuff when you're doing CE5 contact.
Yeah, but they say that the reason our military people have been able to pick up these Tic Tacs, whatever is off following the nuclear fleet, is because of the new radar in the F-118s, right? It's a forward-looking infrared radar that's obviously a better enhancement than the past version, which now all of a sudden is showing these craft pretty much everywhere, right?
Right. Oh, well, they're all over the place. And a lot of them, unfortunately, I always ask the question, is it ET or is it one of ours?
Yeah.
Because if you're a jet pilot and that's what you're read into is an F-117 or, a B-2 Stealth or a F-18 or Hornet or whatever, you are not, none of those guys are read into the man-made UFOs, the ones that are the anti-grav. So they would have no foundation for knowing that those things even exist and could be made at the Lockheed Skunk Works. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's a little bit complicated, because everyone assumes that if you're, and this was my learning curve back in the 90s, is that, the assumption a normal person would have, and this is normal, is that if you're the president or the CIA director or the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency or whatever, or a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee that goes into a SCIF, a secure communication information facility that's sealed away from electromagnetic signals for spying, that, to get a briefing, that those people know about this stuff. They don't. And that's the big myth out there, is that the unacknowledged special access projects are so wrapped up that, I couldn't believe the level of officers and people in government that didn't know, that everyone would assume did. And then the ones who know a little bit, the nature of what's called TSSCI, top secret special compartmented information, is that you may have a top secret clearance and you may be even aware of a certain unacknowledged special access project, but it doesn't mean you're clear to all the other compartments. You see, and that's where it really gets difficult. And what I've been doing with, for 30 years is meeting with people in those projects who don't know each other, but have been in various compartments and trying to put together this mosaic, this puzzle, to figure out where things are, how they're operating, what the architecture of the secrecy is, who knows and why. So why are some CI directors read into this and others aren't? Well, I discovered the ones who knew had come up through the system. And the ones that are newbies that they don't trust yet, they don't tell them anything.
Right.
So it isn't your rank. Everyone thinks it's because you have this office.
No.
It isn't that. It's whether you came up through the system and they trust you to be a secret keeper or not.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think our challenge is, how do we get this technology that we know exists somewhere in the black world out into the white world where we could use it? And that was exactly what Ben Rich was talking about in his talk, was we need to take this technology, we need to get it out for commercial use. There's no reason to keep it hidden anymore. And that was 37 years ago. So if it was true 37 years ago, it's even more true today.
Yeah. Well, that's what everybody was telling me in the early 90s. Here we are in 2020.
Right.
With, a collapsing biosphere, and we're still fighting over oil and nonsense.
Right. So
I think that honestly, it isn't going to happen from the corporate and government sector. It's going to happen from us.
Yeah.
So as you know, my story, I finally said, screw it.
Right.
We're going to do disclosure ourselves. We're going to make contact ourselves. And eventually the third part of the project is why it's this triangle. There's contact, disclosure, and a new energy.
Right.
The 3 points. But that point is a heavy lift, because if someone doesn't hand off an operating system to you, which no one's ever done, I've seen some, but they don't want to. Everyone thinks they're going to be able to bring this stuff out like you would another iPhone and keep it secret or patent it. You can't. So we have never. I'm telling people we're going to have to take the lead on that. Also, the public are going to have to start. Like all these big Silicon Valley firms have incubator funds, where they have 50 million or 100 million in a fund to do some research and explore ideas and develop new technologies. Well, we need one. If anyone's listening in Silicon Valley who has this kind of money, we need one to do this just on these technologies that explain how UFOs are getting energy from space-time, and also how they move. And that needs to be open source. It needs to be on the internet in real time. It cannot be a patent. It cannot be monetized initially. It's got to be a technology that's open source, like they did with GitHub and for software. And but unfortunately, we've never had the resources and funding to do that, because that's not, by the way, thank everyone for funding this film. It was crowdfunded. And if you can, of those of you listening, the way we've been getting the word out about it, we've been #1 in the world on iTunes and Amazon and whatnot, is we're raising the funds to get the word out. The distributor doesn't pay for that. Everyone thinks that these distribution firms pay for the marketing and getting the word out. No, we're doing that. So we raised the money for the movie. Now we're trying to get enough to keep the word going out. So if you go to ce5film.com, it's a crowdfunding site. And, depending on how much you give, you get certain gifts and incentives, and you can get a copy of the film or whatever. But we're still doing that. So those of you who can help us, because I think we've already spent maybe $200,000 on trying to get the word out on this. We need people tweeting and Facebooking and YouTubing, and luckily some celebrities like Demi Lovato and others have tweeted out about the film, but we really need a lot of people to help do that. So it's all networking. So anyone who can help us, again, we don't have an office or a staff. What we raise goes to people who can get things done, whether it's making a movie or getting the word out. My wife and I here work in a corner of our living room, and that's it. Yeah. We don't have a fancy office like you do, bro.
I don't know if it's that fancy, but it works.
It works, yeah.
So make sure everyone reports their sightings to MUFON. We get 500 to 1,000 a month. And I would say about 5% of them end up being something unusual that could possibly not be from here. But it's always been working with you, Stephen. And thank you for having me on the show.
I really appreciate it. It's always a great conversation, and I've enjoyed knowing you all these years. And it's been like a quarter of a century since we met.
Or more.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, and really appreciate your time, and good luck with your work, and hope to see you in California soon if we can get out of lockdown here.
Yeah. I got to give a shout out to Tyler, who's a volunteer here at the office, who's doing CE5 work, and
great.
Very interesting stuff he's coming up with. So
good.
Yeah,
we need more people doing that, because the whole idea we didn't get to, we ran out of time, is this 1% effect in consciousness, like in quantum physics. If enough people do this, it shifts our total civilization.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out the next one right here on the Best of Dr. Stephen Greer.